Monster Hunter Wilds is a wild, exhilarating game that really lived up to my expectations of it. I don't know if you want to label me as a Monster Hunter veteran. I have only played Monster Hunter World last year and have about 50 hours on it. Surprisingly, I didn't even beat the campaign. So I also don't know if you want to label me as a new player, so I'm kind of in a limbo of not being a new player and also not being an experienced player of this franchise. But nonetheless, I was a few years late to the Monster Hunter World, but I loved the game. It was such a unique way of hunting huge monsters that I'm surprised that there's no other successful game that followed suit. So when I saw the Monster Hunter's Wilds trailer last year, I got really excited. And so did millions of players when this game released last week. So what makes Monster Hunter Wilds really good and engaging? I think before going any further, I'll address the elephant in the room. The game runs horribly for most people. I can't say this from a personal experience because my game ran flawlessly, aside from a couple of crashes, which I think is caused due to server overloads, but I really don't know. I have a 4070 Super with an i9, 32GB RAM, and I ran the game at max settings and my game was almost always above 150 frames. But again, most people don't have a juiced rig like mine, and some people have claimed that they are even lucky to run it above 60 frames. If you look at the Steam reviews, it's mostly negative, but not because the game content is bad. It's pretty much all of them saying that they are unable to run the game or it just runs terrible. I think companies should know that if your consumer's average spec is a 3060 and you make your game run poorly on the most common rig, I think they need to spend more time and effort in optimizing their game to be able to run on a good enough graphics setting on the average spec. For those that don't know if your game will run well, because let's be honest, a $70 gamble on a game that may or may not run on your PC is a lot. There's a free benchmark check that you can try out to see if you can run it well, and Steam in general is very generous with refunds. Again, I never had any performance issues personally, but it is a big problem for the average user. Now for the game itself, my only experience with a Monster Hunter game is World, and it's pretty clear that Wilds is attempting at a more narrative approach with this entry. The characters like Alma and Gemma are great, and it's really nice to see these characters really drive the story. It's not the greatest story, but it's a decent attempt in making an engaging narrative that complements the gameplay loop that, let's be real, everyone is playing Monster Hunter for. No one is playing Monster Hunter to wonder why hunters hunt monsters. People are playing to do the hunting of monsters. And so again, it's not the greatest story, but it's a decent complementary to the gameplay that the main story ultimately serves as a tutorial. The way the story introduces each monster that you fight in the main story is actually really cool. Why is the water in the forest red? It's not blood because you can drink it, and there are areas in the forest that aren't red. Oh, probably because there's a monster contaminating the water upstream. Why are the Deshaguma scared of a simple wind chime? Probably because the wind chime sounds a lot like Raidao, and Raidao looks like a fearsome monster. And so it was really nice learning these backstory on not only the characters, but the monsters and how they are incorporated into the ecosystem. It really makes each area a lot more lively in a logical sense. I think the common sentiment, especially for those that have played Monster Hunter before, say that the main story is very easy to complete. It was very easy for me as I only died a couple of times only because I didn't stock up on potions and I was fighting some bosses with only the potions in the supply box. Why is it easy? I think the main thing that makes it easier for me was the addition of the focus mode. You essentially can pinpoint target areas on the body part in the middle of your combo, and you would even turn your body mid-combo to achieve this. This is really game-changing. As a longsword user, I remember being able to get a few hits in and have to stop, reorient myself to either stay on the monster's tail or just being able to hit the monster in general, especially with the more mobile ones. But with this focus mode, I was able to achieve really long combos as I just have myself close to the monster and just harass it endlessly as long as it doesn't like dash away or whatever. Along with the addition of the wound system, it really made these fights really easy. These wounds would appear when you attack a certain body part enough times, and when you're in focus mode, you can see a glowing red mark. You attack enough times, you deal additional damage, and you are rewarded with a monster part. Another big thing they added in this entry is your secret mount. You can travel around the zone with this little buddy, and you can do many things while you're on your mount. You can collect items off the ground, you can use your grapple gun to either alter the environment or grab materials, you can sharpen your weapon, drink consumables, and your secret buddy even stores an extra weapon on its pouch for you to quickly swap your weapon. So yes, you can essentially bring two different weapons on your hunts. I think the intention was to bring two different unique weapons, so like a hammer and a dual blade, but for me, I just brought two different long swords with different elements. I ultimately loved my secret, I nicknamed her Kana, and Kana saved me many times. My only complaint really is that they need to give our secret more cosmetic options. These new systems really help newer players to feel like they have more impact in fights ultimately. I remember playing in World as my first Monster Hunter, and there was a deep learning curve in fighting. My positioning, stamina control, making sure I was facing in the right direction, and not knowing if I was doing the right thing or doing enough. But Wild's new functions really help, especially visually, to let new players efficiently feel like they're doing something. Yes, the main story is very easy for anyone that has played a Monster Hunter game before, but I think ultimately it's aimed at newer players. There are a lot of systems in Monster Hunter, and the main story tries to slowly push new players to experience different monsters in almost like a curated way. There will be times when you'll be fighting alongside NPCs when fighting these monsters. I didn't mind it because it made sense in the context of the story, but I know some people will find that unenjoyable because it's not like your own achievement. But thankfully, the real game starts after you see the credits roll. Now, there is a storyline you can progress through after the main game, but it's a lot more hands-off. It's not about powering through the checklist of main quest. Now, the end game is about increasing your hunter rank. When you get to higher ranks, you get to fight stronger and more unique monsters. Spoilers, but you don't fight Rathalos in the main quest, but is instead one of the many monsters brought back from previous titles into the endgame. Now, World was my first game, so I'm sure this is a normal experience for those that played more than one Monster Hunter game, but I got really excited when I started seeing monsters I recognize. Don't get me wrong, the new monsters like Lalaburina and Raidao are cool, but nothing beats nostalgia like Rathalos, even if that nostalgia was only a year old. And in the endgame, there's even more things to chase for, like obviously getting better armor, weapons, talisman, jewels, and with Arshan weapons. Arshan, Artisan, I don't know, I'm calling it Artisan. But there is always something to chase for, which is really cool. My only complaint really is that it's really annoying hearing Alma tell you to stop fighting a monster because I'm too low of a rank. But I'm pretty sure you can still fight the monster, but it's kind of misleading. Now, this might be a hot take, but it feels like this game lost the element of being in the hunt. I really enjoyed collecting marks and clues of monsters in the area to know where and what the monster is. Then when you gather enough, you can pinpoint them in the map, and the scout flies will appear for you to follow that monster. But in Wilds, you can just spawn into an instance and instantly track the monster. I get it that they removed a tedious part that there may be a growing number of resentment towards, I'm not sure, but it feels too easy in finding the monster. Now, this is more prominent in the main story, but I found that when a monster runs away and goes into a new area, they don't really go anywhere. I kind of miss having to travel halfway across the jungle in World to chase down a monster. It makes it more of a hunt, and honestly, I love being in a hunt in World. I understand if people didn't like having to gather clues and chase monsters through a maze because, let's be real, they've probably been doing it for hundreds, maybe thousands of hours. I only have 50, but I mean, it's just a feeling that I do miss that I have from World. Monster Hunter Wilds is a wild experience. The monsters, the vistas, and the combat itself was an exhilarating ride. The spectacles of these fights were awesome, whether it was avoiding Raidao attacks, to running away from Jin Dahad, or to witnessing Rathian and Rathalos having a mid-air wrestle. It was amazing. The new systems added into these entries really give it a breath of fresh air with a new focus system, wounds, and mounts. Yes, the main story is easy, but it really serves like a tutorial for the real gameplay loop after seeing the credits roll. The characters are great and really help give insight and background to the monsters that you are tasked to hunt. While I do have some concerns with the feel of the hunt, I ultimately enjoyed my time and I can't wait to keep increasing my hunter rank to slay more monsters, and for when they add even more monsters with future DLCs. Assuming that you are able to run this game, for the continued preservation of this ecosystem, the guild authorizes you to hunt some cool monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds, because honestly, so far, this is my game of the year. Thank you for watching, like this video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe as my goal is to get to 500 subs by the end of the month. I got a lot of games to get through this month, such as Kingdom Come Deliverance, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and maybe a few more. So again, please subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.